Be warned, this episode will blow your socks off. We start off with Czechoslovakia. Actions for AP. 9. Diplomatic. I will buy some land from Austro-Bavaria to reach border with Croatia and Slovenia. See map below. To prevent ethnic unrests, I need to reorganize my country. I will officially rename my country to Central European Federation, or just Central Europe. And I will do massive administrative reform. I will send secretly some officials of Russian Rada in exile to Russia to start political unrest. I will form alliance with Somalia, which would be called Independent Alliance. I will offer Ukraine membership in Second Little Entente and promise them protection against Russia. Economic. I will start expanding some of my companies to my puppets and also to my African trade partners. Benin, Togo, Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon. I will invest into public transport. Military. I will make small military unit exclusively for Russian Rada in exile. I will reward German volunteers and return them back to their countries. It seems they gained what they wanted now onto Bengal. Send diplomats to Nepal. Offer them join us. If they don't, Bengal and NWO will invade them. And joining Bengal will keep them safe from threats like China and India. Send a lot of Bengal and U.S. troops to the Nepal border. Change the states of Bengal's capital to Sylhet from Dhaka. Send alliance offers to Egypt, New Oceania, and Germany. Berlin. Implement the CNW currency, 1 CNW ease 1 USD, alongside BDT, 1 BDT is 50 CNW. Bengal, you might want to keep watching. Something interesting will happen soon. Now on to the USA. Normalize relationship with Japan. Declare war on Israel. Ask NWO to join. Implement CNW, send people to the Mars. They may have gotten Israel, but they do not have anything relating to Mars. I don't know what you think is going to happen, but it isn't happening. From here, nobody else submitted, but we will show the aftermath of some decisions. In the year 2027, Bangladesh, a country renowned for its resilience and vibrant culture, found itself engulfed in a new civil war. The conflict, however, was not born out of internal strife alone, but was deeply entwined with the nation's ambitious expansionist policies into neighboring Burma, Myanmar. What began as a strategic move to secure resources and assert dominance soon spiraled into a crisis that threatened to unravel the fabric of Bangladeshi society. The prelude to conflict. Under the leadership of President Rezvon, Bangladesh had embarked on a bold and controversial campaign of territorial expansion into Burma. Rahman's administration had justified the move as a necessary step for securing access to critical resource and mitigating the effects of climate change, which had severely impacted Bangladesh's agricultural output. The government framed the expansion as a mission to liberate oppressed ethnic minorities in Burma, claiming it was an act of solidarity and support. Initially, the expansion was met with some support domestically, especially from those who saw it as a chance for economic growth and greater regional influence. However, as military engagements in Burma intensified and reports of civilian casualties and humanitarian crises emerged, opposition to the war grew. The situation on the ground in Burma quickly deteriorated. The military campaigns, aimed at securing strategic territories, led to significant collateral damage and displacement of local populations. The Burmese military, already engaged in its own internal struggles, mounted a fierce resistance against the Bangladeshi forces. The conflict attracted international condemnation and strained Bangladesh's relationships with other nations, particularly with those who viewed the expansion as an aggressive violation of sovereignty. The domestic opposition to the war grew stronger as the human and economic costs became evident. The conflict had strained Bangladesh's resources, leading to shortages of essential goods and services. Public protests erupted across the country, with many citizens demanding an end to the military operations and a focus on addressing the mounting internal challenges. The rift within. Amidst the chaos, a powerful faction emerged within Bangladesh that opposed President Rahman's expansionist policies. This faction, known as the National Reconciliation Front, NRF, was led by prominent politicians, military leaders, and civil society activists who argued that the war was both unjust and unsustainable. The NRF called for an immediate withdrawal from Burma, a halt to military aggression, and a shift towards diplomatic solutions. As the NRF's influence grew, a significant portion of the military and political establishment began to fracture. Some segments of the military, disillusioned by the protracted conflict and mounting casualties, defected to support the NRF's cause. The once unified front of the government was now deeply divided. The Civil War. The country plunged into civil war as the NRF, backed by dissident military factions and widespread public support, waged a struggle against President Rahman's government. The conflict was marked by intense battles between loyalist forces and NRF fighters, with major cities becoming battleground. The war's brutality was compounded by widespread humanitarian crises, including displacement, shortages of food and medical supplies, and rampant economic instability. The conflict was not just military, but ideological. The NRF's message of peace and reconciliation resoned with a significant portion of the population, who were weary of the ongoing war and its devastating effect. On the other side, President Rahman's supporters argued that the conflict was necessary for the country's survival and future prosperity. The international dimension. The international community watched with growing alarm as the civil war in Bangladesh escalated. Neighboring countries, particularly India and China, were drawn into the conflict, either by providing support to one side or by trying to mediate peace. Humanitarian organizations faced immense challenges in delivering aid, and diplomatic efforts to end the conflict were fraught with difficulty. The United Nations intervened with peacekeeping forces and negotiations aimed at halting the violence and addressing the humanitarian needs of the affected population. Despite these efforts, the road to peace was fraught with obstacles, and the war continued to ravage the country. A glimmer of hope. After years of intense fighting and suffering, a fragile ceasefire was eventually brokered. The peace agreement, mediated by international actors, required significant concessions from both sides. President Rahman's government agreed to withdraw from Burma and engage in comprehensive negotiations with the NRF. In return, the NRF pledged to support a transitional government and work towards national reconciliation. The post-war period was marked by a long and difficult process of rebuilding. The country faced immense challenges in addressing the devastation caused by the war, including the rebuilding of infrastructure, reconciliation between divided communities, and recovery from the economic collapse. The new government, a coalition of former adversaries, worked to address the root causes of the conflict and to ensure that Bangladesh could move forward with a renewed focus on peace, stability, and development. The scars of the civil war were deep, but the nation began to take steps towards healing and rebuilding, determined not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Epilogue. The civil war in Bangladesh served as a stark reminder of the complexities and consequences of expansionist ambitions and internal division. It highlighted the need for careful consideration of the impact of foreign policy decisions on domestic stability and the importance of addressing internal grievances before they escalate into full-blown conflict. The story of Bangladesh's struggle and recovery became a lesson for future generations on the value of unity, dialogue, and the pursuit of peace. In the year 2028, Indonesia, the world's largest archipelagic state, found itself on the precipice of a devastating civil war. The nation, known for its rich tapestry of cultures, languages, and religions, had been pursuing an ambitious and controversial policy of regional unification. Under the leadership of President Ahmad Basri, Indonesia embarked on a bold plan to integrate neighboring Southeast Asian countries into a single political entity called the United Southeast Asian Federation, USAF. The aim was to create a regional superstate that would rival global powers and foster economic growth and security. Basri's vision was grand: to unite Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and several smaller states into a cohesive federation. He believed that a united Southeast Asia would be a powerful economic and political force, capable of standing up to the influence of larger powers like China and the United States. However, this vision was met with intense opposition both within Indonesia and across the region. The strain of unity. The integration process was marked by aggressive political and economic measures. National borders were redrawn, local governments were dissolved, and a new centralized administration was established. The policy sought to impose a singular national identity and economic framework, often at the expense of regional autonomy and cultural diversity. In Indonesia, the archipelago's vast array of ethnic and cultural groups faced pressure to conform to a new national standard, leading to widespread discontent. The central government's attempts to enforce unity led to friction between Jakarta and various provincial leaders. Regions with distinct identities, such as Aceh, West Papua, and Sulawesi, felt increasingly alienated and oppressed. Tensions escalated as local leaders and communities resisted the erosion of their cultural and political rights. The eruption of conflict. The tipping point came when President Basri implemented a series of policies aimed at forcibly integrating local economies into a single, federally controlled system. Agricultural production, which was a major source of livelihood for many in rural areas, was centralized, and local resources were redirected to serve the needs of the new federation. Protests erupted across the archipelago. In Aceh, where separatist sentiments had simmered for decades, clashes between local militias and federal forces intensified. West Papua, with its long-standing grievances over historical injustices, saw the rise of militant groups fighting against the central government's attempts to impose control. In Sulawesi, local communities resisted new economic regulations that they felt undermined their traditional ways of life. The situation was further exacerbated by regional reactions. Malaysia, the Philippines, and other neighboring countries were alarmed by Indonesia's aggressive expansionist policies. They viewed the unification efforts as a threat to their sovereignty and stability. Diplomatic relations soured, and the region became a hotbed of political and military tensions. The civil war unfolds. As the conflict spread, Indonesia plunged into a full-scale civil war. The nation was divided between the pro-federalist forces loyal to Jakarta and the numerous insurgent groups fighting for regional autonomy and independence. Major cities, including Jakarta, Surabaya, and Makassar, became battlegrounds. The fighting was characterized by guerrilla warfare, widespread civilian casualties, and significant infrastructure damage. International intervention soon became a reality as neighboring countries and global powers took side. The United Nations attempted to mediate, but their efforts were hampered by the complex web of local and regional interests. Humanitarian crises unfolded as displaced populations fled the violence, and international aid struggled to reach those in need. The rise of the Federated Resistance. Amidst the chaos, a coalition known as the Federated Resistance emerged. This coalition, composed of former regional leaders, activists, and military officers opposed to the central government's policies, sought to restore local autonomy and promote a more equitable framework for regional cooperation. Their leader, General Hassan Nur, was a charismatic figure who had once served in the national military but had become disillusioned with the federal government's approach. The Federated Resistance gained widespread support from those who were suffering under the new system. They called for a return to a federal structure that respected the diverse identities and needs of the archipelago's various regions. Their message resonated with many Indonesians who felt that the central government's vision was both unrealistic and destructive. The path to resolution. The war dragged on, leaving a trail of devastation and despair. Both sides suffered heavy losses, and the economic and social fabric of the nation was severely damaged. The international community continued to push for peace negotiations, recognizing that a prolonged conflict would have far-reaching consequences for regional stability. After years of fighting, a peace agreement was eventually brokered with significant international mediation. The agreement called for a cessation of hostilities and a return to a more decentralized federation model that would grant greater autonomy to regional governments while maintaining a degree of central coordination. The new framework aimed to balance the aspirations of both the central government and the regional entities. It included provisions for local self-governance, cultural preservation, and economic autonomy. The transition was fraught with challenges, but it offered a glimmer of hope for reconciliation and rebuilding. Epilogue. The civil war in Indonesia served as a stark reminder of the complexities inherent in attempting to impose unity on a diverse and multi-ethnic nation. It highlighted the dangers of disregarding regional identities and the importance of addressing local grievances in any effort towards integration. In the aftermath of the conflict, Indonesia began the arduous process of reconstruction and reconciliation. The lessons learned from the Civil War became a cornerstone of the nation's approach to governance and regional cooperation. The story of Indonesia's struggle and recovery became a powerful testament to the need for respect, dialogue, and understanding in the pursuit of unity. In the year 2028, the United States found itself on the brink of a new civil war. The country was deeply divided, both politically and culturally. The issues that had been simmering for decades had come to a boil, and the fabric of the nation seemed to be unraveling. The seeds of this conflict had been sown over years of political polarization, economic disparity, and social unrest. In the wake of a deeply contested election, where claims of voter fraud and electoral malpractice echoed through the halls of Congress, the nation found itself split into two factions: the Federalists, loyal to the old government structure, and the Patriots, who rallied around a new leader who had risen from the political fringes, Donald J. Trump. Trump, having spent years after his presidency in relative obscurity, had re-emerged with a new vision for America. His message resonated with a significant portion of the population who felt alienated and disillusioned by the status quo. He promised to make America great again, but this time with a twist. His vision included a radical overhaul of the existing governmental system, which he and his followers believed was corrupt and unrepresentative. The Patriot, as Trump's faction was known, were a coalition of disenchanted voters, militia groups, and conservative activists. They believed that the federal government had overstepped its bounds and was infringing on their freedom. Trump's rhetoric was fiery and uncompromising, and he capitalized on the grievances of those who felt left behind by the changing cultural and economic landscape. The Federalists, the remnants of the established government, were led by a coalition of centrist and progressive politicians who sought to maintain the Union and uphold democratic norms. They were determined to preserve the existing system and counter what they saw as an authoritarian threat posed by Trump's insurgency. As tensions escalated, skirmishes erupted across the country. Protests turned into riots, and clashes between the two factions became more frequent. Cities that were once symbols of unity became battlegrounds. The media was polarized, with each side accusing the other of being a threat to democracy itself. The conflict reached a critical point when Trump's Patriots declared the formation of a new government, with Trump as its leader. They set up their own institutions and infrastructure, effectively creating a parallel state. The Federalists denounced this move as a coup and refused to recognize the legitimacy of Trump's government. The United States was now faced with a grim reality: a civil war that threatened to tear the nation apart. The fighting was not only physical, but ideological. Each side accused the other of undermining the principles of democracy and freedom. The war was marked by both conventional battles and digital warfare, as each side used social media and cyber attacks to spread their messages and disrupt the other. Amidst the chaos, many Americans struggled to understand where they fit in this fractured landscape. Families were divided and communities were polarized. The economy, already strained by years of political instability, suffered further as businesses shuttered and supply chains were disrupted. Internationally, the world watched with a mix of concern and curiosity. Allies and adversaries alike speculated on how the internal strife of one of the world's most powerful nations would affect global geopolitics. The potential for foreign interference added another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. In the midst of the turmoil, a small but growing movement began to emerge. Comprised of individuals from both factions who were tired of the violence and division, this movement called for dialogue and reconciliation. They advocated for a return to democratic principles and sought to bridge the chasm between the warring sides. Their message was one of unity and understanding, but they faced significant challenges in gaining traction. As the conflict dragged on, both sides suffered heavy casualties, and the human cost of the war became increasingly evident. The realization dawned on many that the path to resolution might not lie in victory or defeat, but in finding common ground and rebuilding the fractured nation. In a dramatic turn of events, after years of fierce fighting and countless negotiations, a tentative peace was brokered. It was not a perfect solution, but it was a start. A new framework for governance was established, one that aimed to address the grievances of both sides and promote a more inclusive and representative system. Donald Trump, having played a significant role in the conflict, agreed to step down in favor of a transitional government composed of representatives from both factions. The road to reconciliation would be long and arduous, but the country had taken its first steps towards healing. The new era in American history was marked by a renewed commitment to addressing the deep-rooted issues that had led to the Civil War. The lessons learned from this dark chapter served as a reminder of the fragility of democracy and the importance of dialogue and compromise. And so, the United States embarked on a new journey, one where the echoes of the past served as a guidepost for building a more unified and equitable future. Next episode, we will cover the feelings of these leaders as they got roasted alive. Also, viewers vote with the link in the description to vote who gets a prize. Voting ends in 1 day.